Hi everyone, my name is Freda and today I've got my favorite books of 2018 video. So I was actually thinking of filming a video talking about the two books that I read in December because I didn't read more books than that. But then I realized I don't have all that much to say about them, so I decided just to not talk about them and instead just talk about my favorite books of the entire year. I have a bit of a cold, so I don't know how much I will be able to talk just like in one go. If I'm able to talk after filming this, I will also film a video with my reading statistics of 2018 and I hope to get both of these videos up this week and to then upload my sort of reading goals next week. Let's see if that works. I hope it does. But today I thought I might just talk about the books that I really enjoyed in 2018 and that also really stuck with me. So I went through my reading spreadsheet and there were a few books that I rated higher than some of the other ones that I'm talking about right now, but that still didn't really stick with me as much as I maybe thought they would. But these are 10 books that I really loved, sort of my 10 favorite books I guess from the year, and I didn't specifically choose 10 books, they just turned out to be 10 and it's a nice number, so you know, let's just leave it at that. The first book is also the only German language book that I have on this list, but it has also been translated into English. And this is a book called Farbe, Bekennen, and the English title, I can't exactly remember it, it's something like Showing Our Colours. And basically this is a book about Black German history, which is, you know, not something that's very easy to access. White Germans like to pretend that black people are not part of the history of this country, and this book kind of tries to go against that in two different ways. First of all, you have like a very academic sort of overview based on like historical documents, just to sort of try and trace back Black German history, and it goes from, I don't know where exactly it started. I think it might actually start like in the Middle Ages and then go up obviously to present day time. And then from the late 19th century or like early 20th century onwards, you have that sort of coupled with texts by actual Black German women who, you know, lived in Germany at different points of history, and they talk about their experience. So you start off with two women who were born like in the beginning of the 20th century, and then they talk about their experiences. And then you have a lot of women who were born like in the mid 20th century, and then you have a few women who were born towards the end of the century, and they mostly write their texts themselves. I think there were a few texts that were like interview style, but this exactly was the type of book that I had been looking for quite a while, and so it was just like so amazing when I actually found it. And this book really taught me a lot, and if you're interested in Black German history, I would definitely give this a go. As I said, it has been translated into English. I do not know how accessible, like if it's in print or anything, the English translation is, but if you can speak German, you know, you can also get this book. I thought it was fantastic and I'm really glad that I read this. Also, I don't think I'm going to be able to film my reading stats after this because just after talking about one book, I'm in pain. But we're gonna finish this, you know, we just have 9 more books to go. The next one is a book that I listened to an audiobook, but I can imagine sitting down and reading it being just as impressive. I don't know. That is Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien. This was like all over BookTube last year and the year before, so you probably know that this is historical fiction where you sort of follow two timelines, the sort of 90s, early 90s and the, I guess, mid or late 60s in China, and the 90s are set in Canada, or also partially also in China. And so you follow a cast of characters both through the Cultural Revolution in China and also through the events surrounding the Tiananmen Square massacre. And in a way this book just ticked so many boxes for me because I just love multiple perspectives, I love different timelines, and I love beautiful writing. I thought the writing in here was really beautiful, and yeah, this really stuck with me. I feel like I'm being suffocated by my scarf, but I need it because otherwise I'm gonna die. The next book was one that was really fun. So it's like, it's sort of a broad range of like serious books, and this one was just a lot of fun. That was Kissing the Witch by Emma Donoghue. This is a collection of fairy tale retellings sort of in the form of sort of interconnected short stories, I guess, and they very often, like, obviously, as a retelling does, they turn the tale that we know sort of on its head. Very often you have the story told from the perspective of a character who in the original fairy tales, maybe the villain, sometimes even just an irrelevant side character, but always sort of from a point of view and in a way that you wouldn't expect. Also, a lot of these retellings are really gay, so I obviously also really appreciate that, and I just flew through this. It's so much fun, and the fact that you're able to sort of read these stories in a way that they're connected makes it just even more fun than this already was. So yeah, if you like fairy tale retellings and you haven't read this one, I would really recommend it. I had a blast reading this. Now we have a bit of a more serious book again, but also one that I really sort of flew through, and that was Christodora by Tim Murphy. This also ticks the multiple timelines and multiple perspectives box for me, but also the story itself was just really compelling and it's really stuck with me. So this has also gone a bit through BookTube, I think, so you might know what it's about. And so in this book you have a cast of characters that you follow partially through the AIDS epidemic. So a few of the characters are activists and you know, have people in their close surroundings either die of complications due to AIDS, or maybe, you know, some of the characters also die of that. But you also go into the 21st century. You have a lot of characters sort of struggling with drug addiction and complicated relationships, and it really had a big impact on me. So the part about the AIDS epidemic isn't huge. I think when I went into this book I thought it would be bigger. So this is not necessarily a book about the AIDS crisis. It is a part of the book, but I think the drug abuse part was bigger. Obviously the two are connected, but you know, it's not a book, that's my point, it's not a book about the AIDS crisis. But it's still, I thought it was just a book that really moved me. There will be so many cuts in this video because I keep starting to cough like really hard. I'm also starting to lose my voice, oh that's fun. Oh, we have to keep going because I really need to get this video up. And I'm alright. Just starting to lose my voice, it's cool, it's fine. The next book that I finished was another one that I just thought was a lot of fun, and a book of this size is insane that I would read that in 2 days, but I did because it was such fun, and that is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. This is a massive book. It's 550 pages. I read this in 2 days. I just had so much fun reading this. Set in Victorian England. You follow two young women, sort of, and one of them comes from like a very rich sort of background and the other one from London. She lives like in a very shady area, and she's supposed to sort of pull a bit of a trick on this rich girl to get her money, and yeah, you follow them sort of throughout the story. It does get a bit gay, so that's obviously also amazing. You also have different perspectives in here, and like a lot of twists and intrigues, and I just thought this was a lot of fun. And if you want, I think I said exactly the same thing in my recent reads video when I talked about this, but if you want lesbians in Victorian England, then please go for this book. I thought it was amazing and a lot of fun. Now we're back to a very serious book again, and that is Woman at Point Zero by Nawal Saadawi. This is a very short one, but it's a really heavy one. Like semi-fictional, really, about a woman who is sentenced to death, and she's in prison and she tells a story to another woman. And Nawal Saadawi really took to a woman who experienced something really similar to what is happening in the book. So this is why it's like only like semi-fictional. But basically, this woman is in prison, she's sentenced to death, and she tells this other woman of her life, sort of, and of the hardships she has faced throughout her life. And it just mentions so many horrific topics, like female genital mutilation and sexual abuse of children, arranged marriage, forced prostitutions, other forms of sexual assault. You know, it's just one terrible thing after another. So this is really not an enjoyable book at all, because it'll just hit you in so many places and it's just so painful to read it. But I think this is why it left such a huge impression on me, because it's written so beautifully that it's not just like, here are all these terrible things, but it's done in a way that, I don't know, doesn't just shock you but also really makes you feel and makes you think, and that it sort of leaves an impression on you. Because I think very often when we have like terrible things like that, we read it or like we watch it or whatever, and it makes us feel terrible and then we just move on. And I think with this one, I didn't just move on, and it has really, yeah, it has really stuck with me in a way. So yeah, this is what I think. This is one of the most heavy books I've ever read in my life, and it has really, yeah, stuck with me. And so obviously I can't really say that I enjoyed reading this, but I'm so glad that I read it, and this is why it's one of my favorite books of the year. Okay, so I'm editing the video right now, and I'm not sure if my point came across, so I thought I might just insert this here. So basically I think my point was that I think she treats everything that she talks about with so much respect. So it's not just like all these horrible things happening to the main character, because first of all they happened to a real person, because the entire story is not entirely fictional. And I think she just, the way it's treated in the book is treated with a lot of respect. So it's not like, look at all these horrible things, but yeah, she sort of uses them to criticize society and patriarchal structures in a way that works. I find it really difficult to describe that, but I hope that makes any sense at all. And now we're going back to the actual video. The next book is one that I think was one of my favorites because I just read it at the exact right point in my life, and that was The Elephant Vanishes by Haruki Murakami. This is a short story collection, and there isn't even like, there wasn't even anything about the topics that any of the short stories were about that like hit me and I was like, wow, I can relate to this right now so much. But it was sort of the weirdness and at the same time the kind of quiet and calm writing style that I just kind of really needed at the point that I read this book. So I find it difficult talking a lot about this this book, because obviously it is a short story collection, so there are so many different things in here. But there were 3 short stories that really stood out to me that I really loved, which were The Second Bakery Attack, Sleep, and Lederhosen. So those were my favorites from this collection, but overall this sort of quiet weirdness was something that I just really needed at the time that I was reading it, and which is why this was sort of one of my favorite books of the year. I really loved it, and it has really stuck with me. I feel like with each of these books I keep saying, oh, this has really stuck with me, and it sounds so meaningless, but I think about these books every now and again in my everyday life, and that was also how I decided which books to put on this list, because there were, as I said, a few books that I rated higher, but that didn't stick with me as much, so, you know, there's a reason I keep repeating myself. And now we're on to 3 books that I talked about really recently. I uploaded a video in December with like a massive reading wrap up, and I mentioned all of these 3 books in that video, but we're still gonna go through them now. So I don't know if that was self-explanatory, but I'm just going through the year chronologically. So the first of these books, which is the third last for this video, I guess, is How to Be Both by Ali Smith. I'm not exactly sure if there's much else I can say here than I did in my other video, but I think her writing style sort of, and the themes she raises and the questions Ali Smith raises in this book, sort of about the way that generally the world works. Those really weird abstract things, they were just something that I really enjoyed at the time, and I feel, but they're also abstract that I find it really difficult to talk about this book, but I thought it was fantastic. So you have 2 different timelines in this as well. Is there a pattern here? Yeah, there is. I love different timelines. You have 2 different timelines, 2 different characters who have nothing to do with each other whatsoever. One of them is in Italy in the 15th century, one of them is in England in the 21st century, and they go about their lives, and those lives, even though they actually have nothing to do with each other, they are sort of connected throughout the narrative in a way that's just brilliant, but that's like sort of difficult to talk about. I don't know, but I really enjoyed this, and I think Ali Smith is definitely an author that I have to read a bit more from, because so far the 3 books that I've read by her I really enjoyed. The next book is also by a Smith, but not by Ali Smith, but Danez Smith. This is the only poetry collection for this video, one of the very few poetry collections I read last year, but one of the most amazing things I read throughout the entire year. I think a lot of you might have heard of this book because a lot of people on BookTube have talked about it, but basically in this poetry collection Danez Smith sort of explores or discusses what it's like to be black and gay and HIV positive in America today, and pretty much every single poem just left me shaken and with a lot of emotions, and I have something underlined pretty much on every single page here, and it's just fantastic. And if you're hesitant picking up poetry, and if you don't know, because obviously poetry collections are expensive, there are a lot of videos of Danez Smith performing their poetry. They are an amazing performer, and this is coming from someone who generally usually doesn't really enjoy poetry performances, but they are an amazing performer. So if you think you've heard so many good things about this, but you're not exactly sure if you want to pick it up, then go watch a video where they perform poems from this collection, or where they perform anything they've written, because even performances of things that were not in this collection I really enjoyed. So yeah, this was amazing and has really stuck with me, and I hope that many more people read it, because something that can both be sort of relevant in a I guess political way, but also can just be beautiful as a piece of art, is obviously something that we should you know, turn our minds to, and this is definitely one of those things, one of those books. I thought it was amazing. And now we have the last book for this video that I did not give nearly enough justice when I talked about it in my massive reading wrap-up in December, because at that point I had been talking for like, I think 45 minutes, and my brain was gone, I had no energy anymore, and I didn't know what I was saying anymore. But this was actually one of the best books I read last year, and that is Turning by Jessica J. Lee. This is a memoir that she wrote about her year that she spent in Berlin and trying to swim in a different lake sort of surrounding Berlin. There are a lot of lakes around Berlin every week. Sorry, my flatmate just came home, so that's fun. I can't really speak now anymore, but I still want to talk about Turning, so we're just gonna finish this. It's gonna be awkward because I know she's in the room next to me. But basically in this book she doesn't just talk about like going swimming and her experience about that. She talks about like relationships she's had that have been difficult. Sort of, she talks about family and sort of questions around home. She talks about her own struggles with depression and anxiety. She just talks about sort of how she experiences her life in a way that I just thought was beautiful, and in a way really relatable, in another way just like enjoyable to read. And so I don't know, it was a really well-rounded book that I think I also read this one sort of at the right point in my life, which was also definitely part of the reason why I enjoyed this one so much. So yeah, this was Turning by Jessica J. Lee. I feel like I again don't do it justice, but now there's a different reason, because I'm not home alone anymore, and also I can't really speak anymore because everything hurts. But this was an amazing book, and the last of my favorite books of the year. Tell me about your favorite books of the year, because I have too many books on my TBR, but I'm always looking for new amazing books. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I will not go on filming my stats video right after this because I can't speak. I'm in pain, I can't do it, but I will film that hopefully tomorrow or something, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!